I just want to share some simple tips that I believe will help us in our drafting of solicitations and contracts. Kind of like how we all know when we're learning to drive, we're told before you set off or before you move the vehicle, check your side mirrors, your rear view mirror, make sure your wipers are working. And at the beginning of when we're learning to drive, we kind of maybe do that, and when we get experience, we just get in and move. And then if you're like me, you're in the middle of the highway trying to navigate or trying to change lanes, and you realize, oops, my side mirror is turned the wrong way. So trying to catch some of these things before we set off or before we have our contracts or solicitations on the street, I think will help us in the back end avoid having to pull the solicitation, worst case scenario, go into court, or just wasting time and resources trying to mitigate or correct the issues. So the title of my, see if this works, yes. The title of my session, Back to the Basics. Some of it we already know, so hopefully this is kind of a refresher, but if you don't, I hope you pick up 1 or 2 tips that can help you in the drafting process. So for my session, we're going to talk about we're going to have 3 main sessions. We're going to talk about document sections. I'm going to give some tips on specific document sections, and then I'm going to give some tips on administrative best practices, and then some tips on language drafting and grammar. So the first document section I'd like to talk about is the contract document section. So for this section, the main thing you want to do is to avoid unwanted documents, kind of avoiding unwanted passengers in your vehicle. And going with a driving theme, if you see red, it means don't do it. If you see yellow, caution. If you see green, go, go, go. So avoid unwanted documents. In this section, you want the 4 corners of your document, and only the documents you want in there should appear here. You want to be able to eliminate any unwanted documents or documents that sometimes you're transitioning from a solicitation to a contract. I know for New York, when we're going through that process, several of the attachments fall off. And so you want to be able to catch any document that should not be in your contract. And the example that I want to use is we were reviewing one of the master agreements and realized that in that section, the lead state had mistakenly included this document. We didn't really know what it was. It says the lead state's bilateral agreement. That sounded a lot to us like the participating addendum. So we had to create explicit language in our contract, which we call piggybacks, which incorporates the master agreement, to explicitly remove this document because we didn't want it in our contract. So you just have to make sure that within that section, you're only including the documents you want. And if there's a document there that you don't want, you're removing it or explicitly nullifying it. Then avoid duplicates. And this is for conflict of terms, order of precedence section. No document should appear twice in this section. And for example, you have a contract number 2318 that already includes Appendix A and Appendix B. You've placed Appendix A on line 1, you've placed Appendix B on line 2. And now you're going to list the contract on line 3, contract 2318, including all appendices and attachments. That's where the issue is, because that already ropes in A and B, but you've just excluded A and B on line 1 and 2. So what you add is language, again, explicitly excluding Appendix A and B, so there's no conflict. You don't have an internal conflict in here. And I've seen sometimes this happen where we don't really think through to remove some of the duplicates. So something to watch out for. In the next section, we're going to talk about the definition sections, and this is one of my favorites. And when you get to this section, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. Are defined terms being used? If it's a defined term that's not being used, delete it. Otherwise, it makes your writing look sloppy. If the second question is, are defined terms being used consistently? To try to find this, sometimes you use your find, replace all feature, which I would not advise you do, because you want to be able to make sure that you're not creating awkward replacements. You want to make sure that you're capitalizing where you need to capitalize and not capitalizing where you don't need to capitalize. Because sometimes you have a defined term that has a regular meaning to the word, and if you just use the find replace all feature, you're going to be in trouble, because there are going to be places like website links where you're going to be changing words into capitals that don't need it. So make sure, are the defined terms being used consistently? Capitalize where they need to be capitalized, and don't capitalize where they don't need to be capitalized. And then, are defined terms being used enough? If you find that you have a term or a defined term that you're using maybe only once or twice, consider just placing the definition where you would have put the defined term. That saves the reader having to go back to the glossary to find whatever definition you were trying to attach to that word. And that makes things easier for you and the reader and whoever is going to use the document. Next, I'm going to talk about some administrative best practices that I think will help us in our day-to-day work. And the first I'll talk about are templates. We all love templates. I think templates are great, but we have to see them as a starting point, not the end point. And we also have to see them as living, breathing documents that can evolve over time. And so with templates, you have to have the mindset of they need to be reviewed and updated from time to time. And if you have that mindset, it's going to make things easier on you, because actually I just went through, my office just went through updating several of our templates, and believe me, it's not fun, but it has to be done. And one tip that I would give to make things easier on yourself is, throughout the year, try to plan and schedule some time to update the templates. So let's say in the summer, you know that things are a little dull. You can schedule a week or two where you go through your documents and update what needs to be updated. Rephrase something. You're getting a lot of questions on Section 5. Maybe you need to rephrase or redraft that language to make things clearer. Then, throughout the year, as you're using the template, have a cheat sheet. Once you're using the template and you realize there's an issue here, you just note it down on that cheat sheet, and then at the end of the year, or when you come to your review session, you just bring that sheet along, and it's easier on you. You don't have to think about what needs to be changed at that point. And then another administrative best practice tip, tools and software to help you compare for internal consistency and consistency over drafts. I can't tell you how many times you draft a document, you send it out for somebody to review, and it comes back and you're like, that was not what I put in there. I know something's changed. So some of the I didn't want to go complicated with AI tools, but some of the very, very basic tools that we have on hand in Microsoft Word, there's a split feature, there's a compare feature that would allow you to compare your drafts, or internally, you can split the screen and they both can scroll at the same time, and you can use that to compare various sections of your document at once. I know Google Docs has version history, Microsoft Word also has it. You can compare the language in the various versions that you had. The desktop features that also allow you to have different documents, compare different documents at once on the same screen, one side by side, top, bottom, however you want to look at it. So let's take advantage of some of these nifty tools and software to help us be able to ensure internal consistency and consistency over draft with our language. And then multiple monitors or screens. In New York State, we get 3 screens, which is awesome. So as many screens as you can get to kind of have your documents, multiple documents side by side, however you want to have the documents, but being able to have those screens so you can put one document in one document and just visually be able to see, some of the differences or similarities, that's always helpful. So I'm a fan of multiple screens, but I know there's some people who swear by just one screen, but that's okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't scrolling here. Okay. So language drafting, now we're in section C, which is language drafting and grammar tips. So this is actually one of my my favorite areas because I was an English major, then became a lawyer, and then a transactional attorney. So paying particular attention to grammar and drafting, I get easily kind of miffed when I see some of these little little things that could be better and help our drafting look more professional. So avoid lengthy sentences or wordy phrases, like in combination with, by virtue of, in order that, at the time at which, all could be simplified to the list on the right. Also, use lettering or numbering, right, instead of bullet points, so that when you're referencing back to that section of your document, you're not saying the fifth bullet on page 16, right? That doesn't sound professional. You want to say section 5.32, and there's the language. You can easily go to it. And then avoid unnecessary phrases, like for the avoidance of doubt. The reason why we're having the four corners of our document, or we're drafting the solicitation, is for the avoidance of doubt of both parties. So you don't need that phrase anywhere in the document. Once the document is clear, once you have everything you need in it, all doubt is avoided. So no need for phrases like that. People drafting the thing, they think it makes it sound professional, but it's kind of the opposite. Now, this is my last main slide. Avoid paraphrasing. You don't want to try to say the same thing in different ways, because then you might be creating different requirements. And I find myself giving this review, every time I have to review a solicitation, find myself giving this advice multiple times. And I feel like in every review that I do, because people think sometimes it's good to not say that, like, it gets boring, but actually you want to be boring in a contract or solicitation because you don't want confusion. If you're going to have attachments that are going to feed off of the main document, your copy and paste is your friend. Just copy what you need and place it in the attachment so that you're not creating different requirements in the attachment conflicting with the main document. Avoid find, replace, or feature. I said that in the beginning, to avoid awkward replacement. It just shows that you're being lazy, being sloppy. You're not going through your document to make sure that whatever needs to be replaced actually needs to be replaced. So if we can avoid that, we have more of a professional-looking document, and we're not having website links that are having capitalized words that shouldn't be capitalized. And then avoid common homonym errors. Affect, effect. Many times people confuse that. Ensure, ensure, assure. And I actually have a question for us. So I was reviewing a document, so preparing my presentation, and I found this statement, and I thought, perfect, this is, and I used the wrong word, just so you know. Since laws, regulations, requirements, and industry guidelines change, consulting definitive sources to ensure, assure, a clear understanding of compliance requirements is critical. So the original sentence used one of these words, but they used the wrong word. And I just want us to take a poll and see in this room which of the three words we think should be in that sentence. So, okay, so I think there's going to be yes, so there's a QR code. Everyone gets to vote. Which of the three words should have been in that sentence? Okay. All right, so I'm going to give it a couple more seconds, but it seems like most of us chose the right word, which is ensure. And actually, the original sentence used assure, and I'm not surprised that some people chose it, but that's the wrong word. And I keep seeing that in documents that I'm reviewing, and I hope that from today, you know that's the right word, ensure, right? So key takeaways, I hope that with all that I've said, I could have been here for an hour going through more tips, but I hope that with the little I've said, you can walk away with just one or two that are going to help you with your drafts, solicitations, or contracts. And hopefully it's also made you think about more or other tips or other guidelines that you can use in your own drafting process to improve the process so that you're not having to deal with issues down the line. Thank you very much for your attention, and have a good day.